Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, home of all things stock, investment, and personal finance related. Now for today's video, and backed by popular demand, we've got Sebastian joining us. He runs one of the top channels on YouTube if you're looking for information about Bitcoin mining companies, and we've got a ton to talk about since our last update. So on the agenda today, we're going to be talking about the big ruling between the SEC and Grayscale. We're going to be talking about the impact that has on spot Bitcoin ETFs, and we're going to be giving you some of our top picks for the back half of 2023. Now, before we get into all that, please take a second, hit the like button, you guys. It's a big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join. And let me know in the comment section below what you think about this spot Bitcoin ETF, if you agree with our top picks, and which companies you're currently buying and selling. Now, with that being said, let's get into today's interview. Okay guys, so that's right. Today's video, we've welcomed Sebastian back to the channel for a second time. Sebastian runs one of the most fast-growing and informative channels on YouTube right now if you're following the crypto Bitcoin mining space, and specifically the publicly traded companies in the Bitcoin mining space. So Sebastian, thanks so much for being here, and congrats on the growth on your channel since our last update.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bryce. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I saw you cross 6,000 subscribers, and it's really no surprise. You put out great content. I've been following your videos pretty much daily now, and I know you've put out a few that I wanted to touch on in today's discussion. So no real agenda, but great to have you back. First thing I wanted to pick your brain about, Sebastian, probably the biggest news since our last meeting was the decision from the SEC on the Grayscale situation, the GBTC trust being converted into a spot Bitcoin ETF. It was a favorable ruling, but from my understanding, it doesn't guarantee that it'll be transformed. It just guarantees they'll relook at the situation. Is that accurate? And what's your read on that?
Right, so I got the same reading as you did on that one. It's basically saying that the SEC has not proved their case on why they shouldn't approve or transfer the Bitcoin ETF trust over into a spot Bitcoin ETF. So the SEC is going to have some time to look over that. It's probably going to be like another application being submitted for them. And then they're going to have that, what is it, usually like 160 days or more, whatever it takes, 240 days time that they can push the can down the road until it actually does get passed, or even if it gets passed.
Yeah, and I saw you put out a video, I think you called it kicking the can down the road. I thought it was a good take on it. Now, really interesting price action on Bitcoin, and I was following this very closely. So we saw that ruling come out, there was a big spike, then people kind of digested the news. Now basically we're back to where Bitcoin was prior to that interaction. However, in my mind, Sebastian, that was pretty monumental, really. It was the first step needed, or first domino to get these eventual spot Bitcoin ETFs. Do you think that presents an opportunity right now to be accumulating Bitcoin or the miners?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, with that decision that came in through the courts on this, it definitely put the ball back into the SEC court, where they have to rule on something and come up with a more, I would say, illustrative demonstration of why it shouldn't pass, right? We've seen other countries pass spot Bitcoin ETFs. There's no reason why the US shouldn't do it as well. We have a bunch of applications that are on the table right now with the SEC that got kicked down the road a little bit here. But eventually, a lot of people are still saying that within the next 3 to 6 months, we should see a spot Bitcoin ETF. A lot are also hoping that it's going to be for the basket being approved all at once instead of one fund over another one.
Sure. I know we talked about that in our last video. I personally think and hope they do kind of approve it as a batch rather than individually, just for competitiveness. But it will be interesting to see. Now, I know you put out a really interesting video just recently here, performing really well, talking about what would happen if 1% of the assets under management globally flowed into Bitcoin. And this is kind of a question I've been kicking around as well. What does it really mean when these spot ETFs open up? Why is it so monumental for Bitcoin? What's it going to do to the share price of some of these Bitcoin miners? So let's maybe talk about that, Sebastian. Why is it a big deal if we get this spot Bitcoin ETF?
Well, it makes it a lot easier for institutions, even just regular traders to get into Bitcoin, right? A spot Bitcoin ETF basically follows the same price as Bitcoin does. So it's an easy on-ramp for investors to get into Bitcoin without actually having to have the private keys, the wallets, everything else that goes with owning Bitcoin right now. It's a little bit more challenging for people that are maybe not as computer savvy. So I think that's the main reason why a lot of people are hoping that this spot Bitcoin ETF will drive adoption forward and introduce more people into this space as well.
Gotcha. And the thing I think that a lot of people are wary of is we've seen these big exchanges collapse, FTX and Celsius and all the rest. And people are really concerned. If you want to own Bitcoin, that's great, but it's very difficult to do so unless you have your own keys, you know how cold storage works, you're trusting these third-party exchanges. So assets under management specifically, if we get these spot Bitcoin ETFs, there's trillions of dollars under management. I think I saw something like Fidelity had 37 million users or something like that. So not only is it the scope and scale of money, but it's the scope and scale of people too. What do you think is going to happen there if we see that? Is it going to just flow in on day one? Do you think they're going to be at a 1% allocation? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, that's a tough question. We don't know how much is actually going to flow into it. We have a lot of people that are saying that potentially 1% is going to possibly flow into it from these funds, which include Fidelity, you got Galaxy, Valkyrie, BlackRock also. BlackRock is probably the biggest one out there with over, $9 trillion under management. This was back in, I believe, this year that they reported it. So there's a lot of money that could possibly flow into it. We just don't know exactly how much is going to flow into it. So in the video that I did yesterday, I took a look at 0.5% being invested with all of these companies and companies around the world that have assets under management, and then looking to see what the roll-on effect would be of that if regular investors got into it as well. Some of these smaller shops that have investments for people as well as hedge funds. Then you got also pension funds as well in that, other funds. I mean, you could throw the book at this pretty much. Whatever has funds to invest in it, they could possibly invest into it, but we just don't know how much is going to basically flow into it.
Yeah, and obviously we don't know the amount, but there is going to be a big pressure on demand, obviously, right? There's going to be a ton more demand. And what I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit is I think, honestly, people are kind of underrepresenting this. I've seen a lot of things on Twitter or X saying, hey, there's 21 million Bitcoin and 33 million millionaires, or if everyone owned one Bitcoin, or whatever the case is. But I wanted to get your thoughts on this. In my opinion, Sebastian, most of the people that hold Bitcoin are in it for the long run. I've heard there's a lot that's been lost, stolen. Satoshi has 1 million of them. MicroStrategy has 100,000 of them. A lot of them are spoken for, right? Not to mention halving is going to impact the new supply coming online. So in my mind, I'm really viewing this as a perfect storm or situation, I guess, if you're an investor. A ton of demand, limited supply in the current ecosystem, a reduction in the new supply coming in. Am I missing something here, or is this just setting up to be a dream for us?
It could be, exactly, as like you said, right? We're only about 7 months away from the halving event. If the spot Bitcoin ETF also gets approved within the next 6 months, that goes right in with it. So not only do you get the supply shock happening at 7 months, possibly in April of next year, you have the spot Bitcoin ETF being approved. There's just a lot of things that are going for us that could catapult Bitcoin price going up much, much higher than we've seen in the past. I don't think we're going to have the same percentage gains like we had in the first cycle or the second cycle, where we're up over 10,000% or something like that. But I think value-wise, it's still going to be great, possibly over 200,000. Exactly where it's going to end up at, we really just don't know.
Yeah, it's exciting to think about, and we're going to talk about some of our trades here in a second, but I've seen those figures, 100,000, 150, 200, 500. Really, for me, I don't care what it is. Anything north of 100 or 150 is a huge opportunity for anyone invested in these companies. And the next thing I wanted to kind of transition to, speaking of investments in these companies, you follow a lot of the crypto or Bitcoin miners. We saw a note saying BlackRock is now the largest or second largest shareholder in a lot of the companies that both of us talk about on our channels. What's your take on that, Sebastian? Do Do you think they're slow playing it and they're building their hand before they let the cat out of the bag? Do you think there's any manipulation? Do you think they're holding these miners and then they're going to dump them in favor of their ETFs? What do you think's going on there?
Well, one thing we've learned with the miners is, at least historically, they've acted as a leverage play on Bitcoin, right? So also BlackRock's not stupid. They know, they do their math, they have their analysts and everything else looking into it as like we are looking into it, but they maybe have a little bit more brain power than we do. So they could have conversations with the CEOs, with other parties and things like that. They could look into things a little bit more deeper than we possibly can. But I think they're buying now because usually the Bitcoin miners are a little bit depressed before the halving event. And it's just looking at what they're generating, what they're possibly going to be generating later on. I mean, it's a no-brainer. At least for me, it's a no-brainer. I'm pretty sure it's a no-brainer for you as well. And they're just going to continue to accumulate as much as they can. I've done some numbers. I looked at some institutions for CleanSpark, Marathon, TeraWolf, and BitDigital today. All of them had pretty much increases in the number of institutions that are buying in month over month. So that's a good sign there. Institutions are getting in, and they are getting in before the halving event, which then we have the price appreciation in Bitcoin happening after that. They're going to make a lot of bank for that.
Yeah, I think it is a no-brainer for me. Maybe we're both wrong. Maybe BlackRock's wrong. I don't know. But to me, it seems too good of an opportunity to pass up, or too much asymmetrical risk here. Now, it's really interesting. I've asked a few of the CEOs this. What do they think is going to happen to their stock price when the ETF's approved, right? Are people parking money in the miners now because that's the only spot they can put it, and then they're going to move it? Or I guess the other side of the fence is kind of a rising tide lifts all ships, right? It doesn't really matter if they do move it. If the price of Bitcoin goes up, these guys make Bitcoin. Obviously, they're going to be more valuable. Do you think we're going to see any of that type of issue with the miner stocks, or you think they'll continue to act as a leverage play?
So I actually think they will continue to act as a leverage play on it, because if you look at the spot Bitcoin ETF, it's going to trace the Bitcoin price. So let's say Bitcoin goes just up to 200,000 in the next year, year and a half, whatever it might be. That would be from the point where you are right now. That's going to be what, an 8x, right? Whereas the miners could still be at least a 10x, if not more. Sometimes they're like 17, 20x. So there's still a lot more money to be made in the miners, in my opinion, than there is just holding on to Bitcoin right now.
Gotcha. Okay, well, that's all really good. I'm glad we got to chat about that. Now, I wanted to start talking about some more specific companies and trades. Since our last video, I've had Sue Ennis on from Hut 8 Mining to talk about the merger. I came away from that conversation actually feeling really encouraged and refreshed with the outlook of the company, the various different revenue streams. I've also talked to TeraWolf. The next day after talking to Paul, I was out there buying more shares. That guy's put in $12 million of his own money this year to TeraWolf. And then CleanSpark, I know you just put a video out. Again, massive increase in their reserve or their HODL month over month. Just really firing on all cylinders. I was saying before the interview here, I just loaded my account. I'm going to be buying more tomorrow. What are you seeing out there that's looking attractive, or what are you buying right now?
For me personally, it's more CleanSpark. I've been buying into them since last year at $9, and I've dollar cost averaged down all the way down, and I've been just following it, and I've been loving what they've been doing. They've been buying in the bear market. They've been building on the bear market, selling, Bitcoin at the highs when Bitcoin was at 69,000, where everybody else was trying to hodl it. So I think they have the right strategy in mind to grow in the bear markets, sell in the high markets, so they can do this kind of things where they do grow from basically having 2 exahash just a year ago almost, to being at almost 16 exahash at the end of this year. So it's huge growth for them. They've done a phenomenal job, and that's why I've been in it for a long time. And it's based on the numbers that I keep track of, and how they're performing, how they're doing, everything else. The other one that I also have liked for a long time has been Bitfarms. We've got plenty of shares of them, so I'm not going to be buying any more of them currently. I do want to buy more CleanSpark shares when we get to 10,000 shares. I'm at 7,000 something right now, so I still have a little ways to go. And then there are other companies like Marathon, Riot that have, great operations. Marathon a little bit more expensive as far as production is concerned, but still, I mean, the size of them is fantastic. And I think they just reported today that they're going to be buying another 5 exahash to increase. So it's just one of those things that you can't really lose on some of those companies. I think in the long run, in the short term, we could go down in price, but in the long run, I think you're going to do fine if you dollar cost average in. And then you have like TeraWolf. TeraWolf has also done a fantastic job. They have great costs as far as electricity. The only concern with TeraWolf for me is the debt, unfortunately. And then you get companies like Iris Energy also, which has been doing a fantastic job, but they haven't reported their quarterly results yet or their half-year results because they do it biannually. If we get some data on that, maybe that could shed some light into it. But right now, it's just kind of like, why isn't this being reported? Everybody else has reported the numbers, what's going on there. So that's a little concern there. But Iris Energy was one of the ones that I wanted to buy next, but I'm holding off there.
Yeah, I bought a little Iris in Q2. It is interesting. I know Bitfarms is always right on top of it. They're the first to report, first day of the month every time on the prior month's production. Now, you mentioned with CleanSpark, you're trying to get up to 10,000 shares. Are you swing trading anything here as we're seeing Bitcoin fluctuate? Are you buying any options or are you just long and strong shares, dollar cost average?
I'm a simple investor, just dollar cost average in for the long term until we get probably into the heavy events, and then we'll see how things go with Bitcoin. It's going to take at least probably 6-8 months after the halving event for Bitcoin to start appreciating quite nicely. And then afterwards, with obviously the supply constraints that we're going to have with Bitcoin, that should propel Bitcoin up higher. And then I'll probably start dollar cost averaging out once I see that we're getting maybe close to the top, which we don't know where it's going to be. So I'm guessing it's going to be somewhere north of 100,000, but I just don't know where.
Yeah, that's the same approach I'm taking. I've tried thinking about trying to swing trade and following the RSI and moving 10% of my stack around. I never want to do it. I'm always worried I'm going to be caught without a chair when we get the big moves. So very similar approach. A few people have asked about my option strategy with CleanSpark. So I do hold call options. I've chosen to go for the January 2025 expiration just so it's on the other side of halving, you guys. As Sebastian just said, it may take 6 or 8 months or something after halving to start seeing that price appreciation. So I just didn't want to run out of time. The strike price on those is $2.50. So essentially whatever CleanSpark is trading at in January of 2025, you minus the $2.50 and then you minus what I paid for each contract, and the rest is what I keep as a profit. So a different strategy, a little bit more risky, but again, a little bit more leverage play on CleanSpark. So just wanted to explain that. Now, Sebastian, I know I've kind of taken us all over here, the spot Bitcoin ETFs, some price targets, some company specific stuff. Is there anything we're missing or anything you want to talk about that viewers should have on their radar?
Well, obviously Hot 8 is, I think, one that they should have on their radar. We know that they haven't done too well this year. Almost a year now with the issues that they've been having with Drumheller and then the lawsuits and everything else. But I think as we get closer to the US BTC merge with them, it's looking more interesting to me because of what US BTC is adding to it. Obviously, Hot 8 has a large HODL position also. That could be a nice catalyst there. So I do think that's going to be interesting, something to watch out for as far as how they're going to grow before the halving event. I don't know how much higher they're going to go in hash rate, but they're supposed to be doing 7.5 exahash when they're combined, which is pretty good. Like to see them get over at least 10 exahash by the end of, well, probably not by the end of this year, but hopefully by the time halving happens, be close to that. I would think it would be a good goal for them. And then with the way that they are diversified with all of their GPU miners that they're using now for AI, things like that, that's also interesting. We'll have to see how that progresses forward for them. It hasn't been a big money maker for them yet, but it is improving. So we'll see on that. And then who else is there that's really kind of, I think, being down? There's other companies that are being down, but they're also very risky. I think Stronghold is another one that's been being way down. They're way undervalued, but they also have debt problems. So that's kind of one to kind of watch out for. High risk, high reward potentially, but definitely not something you want to be in it for too long of a time.
Yeah.
But I think that's about it as far as miners are concerned.
So I know we've covered a lot in today's presentation, Sebastian. I really appreciate your time. As I mentioned, your channel is growing exponentially. Hopefully exactly what we see with the price of Bitcoin. So I look forward to doing this again next month. We said we'll try and get Anthony on with us and have kind of a group discussion. But yeah, make sure you check out his channel, you guys. Daily videos you're doing now, Sebastian?
I try to do daily videos if there's anything that's important to discuss with the Bitcoin miners, but for the most part, it's whenever I can. But yeah, daily is kind of the usual number.
Sure. Okay, great. Well, we'll keep an eye out. Thanks again for your time, and we'll see you next month, Sebastian.
Thanks, Bryce. Thanks for having me on.
Cheers.